Hey guys, musicninjamat here. Got a huge variety of subjects for you today. Warning, there will be spoilers ahead for a lot of the subjects that I'm going to be talking about, and there will be timestamps down below for everything mentioned in the video. Starting with the shake-up, which I mentioned last video. Just to run through, Raw got AJ Styles, The Miz, Andrade and Zelina, Ray, The Usos, Naomi, Lacey, Aleister Black, Ricochet, Cedric Alexander, Eric Young, the War Raiders renamed to the Viking Experience, which is just an awful name, Lars, and EC3. There are some really fun picks in there. You've got people like the Usos that can improve the tag team division. AJ can have some stellar rivalries there. Miz is just great wherever he goes. You've got people like EY that can maybe finally enjoy a big singles career. So some fun picks for Raw. SmackDown got Roman Reigns. They got Finn Balor, which put both titles on SmackDown, but apparently Joe is going to Raw. Elias, Bailey, Mickey James. Lars popped up again, so I guess he was on Raw, but then got put on SmackDown. Ember Moon, Buddy Murphy, which I'm especially excited for. This is a really exciting pick for me because I'm a huge Buddy Murphy fan. Kyrie came up, so the Sky Pirates, unfortunately, that means they're split up, but she's now partnered with Asuka, and Paige is their manager. This was the tag team Paige was excited to bring up. Chad Gable, again, this is exciting. He can get a good singles run, and finally Bobby Roode can do something else. Liv Morgan, who is currently one of my favourites on the roster, again, really excited for a solo run for a lot of these superstars, and this is why I think SmackDown has more interesting picks in a sense, depending on how they're used. And then lastly, they got Apollo Crews and Heavy Machinery. Like I said, some really awesome picks there. Finn Balor on SmackDown, that's pretty cool. The thing that got me was that SmackDown was meant to have the most historic signing ever, and it was like teased to be Elias, but then Roman Reigns came out, and I was like, both these guys are huge stars, but I thought we might get a return. And it's one of those things where the shake-up was done quite well. I did enjoy it. However, is it even necessary? Because people keep showing up all over the place. The club seem to be on Raw now, and then Aleister Black, it looked like actually he was on SmackDown. Are brands starting to matter less again? With WWE, it seems like for every amazing thing they do, like Bray Wyatt's new gimmick, which is phenomenal, they then do something that I'm like, but why? Like having Kevin Owens in the New Day for like a week or two to just do a very predictable turn. It's silly. We've got some changes coming to SmackDown. Apparently the presentation style of it is going to be changing, so it's more of a full-on sports show. It's going to be crossing over with other sports shows, and I'm hoping this means a bigger focus on the wrestling. Obviously on the rumour mill, apparently loads of people are ready to leave. People like Leo, people like Sasha, people like Harper, Wolf. Speaking of people leaving, Dean Ambrose had this awesome new video up on his Twitter of him breaking free from the WWE, of him going back to being John Moxley, and it's just the best thing Dean's got to do in so long. Looking at Money in the Bank, it's looking okay. I always base it on the Money in the Bank matches and the participants. Yes, there are some that are not great, but there's also some really good ones in there. And in the last little bit of kind of wrestling related news, looks like John Cena might be appearing in Suicide Squad 2, which is pretty cool. So now I'm moving on to what I would say is the big main part of this video, and that is my Endgame reaction. How did I feel after I saw the film? I wrote down a lot for this, and not in any particular order. I just put my thoughts down and just wrote everything out. So there's quite a bit, but I did try and condense it down. So straight up, I can say I did like this film. I just had a few issues with it. That's the best way to describe it. Didn't hate the movie, just had a few issues that kind of stopped me from completely loving it. The pace of the movie, it would go from super fast to a complete crawl crawl to super fast again, and I like a pace that's a bit more gradual in build. There were choices that I understood, that there was nothing particularly wrong with, but it was things that we'd speculated about, were excited about, and just went, oh, that's what they're doing. So Carol saving Tony. It was, who's going to save Tony? Makes sense it was Carol, but I was a bit disappointed. And Scott getting out of the quantum realm just because a rat conveniently went over the console. Again, I was like, who's going to bring him out? And it was just a bit disappointing. With these surprises, I was waiting, I know it's foolish, but I was waiting for a big new character. And when they said, I think we're going to need an even bigger brain, I thought it was going to be Reed Richards. I really had an issue. I know I'm saying a lot about my issues, but there are things I liked, I promise. I didn't like what they did with Hulk or Thor. I wanted to see more of New Asgard, I think. I wanted to see more of how that came to be and how it works as a place. I feel like there was a build from Infinity War for certain characters. There were these arcs that just fell flat then in Endgame or felt unfinished. And I think that's a lot to do with the 5-year time gap. Like with Hulk. When we last saw Hulk, he didn't want to come out. He was scared of Thanos. What's going to happen? How's this going to develop? 5-year time gap, and Bruce goes, yeah, I spent some time in the Gamma Lab and now we're just fine. We're both. And I'm like, no, I wanted to see that. I wanted to see that struggle. I wanted to see Hulk not want to come back out. And the tone was kind of all over the place with this movie. It would go from super light-hearted and silly to really dark and just flip-flop a lot. With the 5-year gap as well, it left a lot of confusing bits and pieces, such as when it comes to Peter Parker and his schoolmates, because you're like, well, how does the aging thing work? Are some of them 5 years older and they've gone, but then other people in the snap will then come back younger? There's all these questions that we have about how does the snap work? How does the time jump affect everything? Another thing, I would have liked a lot more of Ronin. We got the one scene, which was a fantastic scene of him fighting, but I wanted to see more of that character, where he came from, and some of his missions. We all had the theory that the quantum realm would somehow play a big part in this film, and that time travel would be involved. Of course, that was correct, and I like that they set rules. I like that with the time travel, they do say this is how it works, going into the past doesn't change the present. I like that, but then it gets a bit messy, because there are bits and pieces where I'm going, wait, did they break their rule there? Trying to figure that sort of thing out. And it's odd because at the end of the day, they don't go back before those 5 years. So the whole Marvel universe has shifted forward 5 years. With the whole time heist part of the film, I felt it had so much potential, and revisiting old scenes was great. Being able to see almost these behind the scenes parts we didn't see before, that was great. Characters having moments like Tony seeing his dad, they were amazing, they were emotional, but I can't help but feel like they didn't do enough with the time travel scenes. You could have done so much, but somehow they felt dragged out in a sense, but also very simplified. I also liked seeing Thor with his mother, that was very sweet. The moment of Kat looking on at Peggy. Like I said, some really nice moments in this. The way it was all filmed was incredibly clever as well, as I said, putting together old footage with new footage. One thing, there were a few too many jokes. I've said this about a lot of Marvel films. When it's joke after joke after joke after joke, it gets a bit much. One really cool thing as well, we got to see Jarvis, and it's the same actor from the Agent Carter show, so that was really cool. But there's also these bits where I go, I struggle to believe that both Clint and Nat don't know who Red Skull is, and I find it crazy that Cap's not recognised in the army base. Now, there's a lot of things in this film, like Loki getting the Tesseract and escaping, where I'm like, I think we're getting a lot of backdoor pilots almost for a lot of the Disney Plus TV shows, and I actually really like that. Another bit that was a little bit messy, but made more sense the more you think about it and when you see it more and more, was the two Nebulas being in the same time and them sharing memories, and this is how the past Thanos is able to find out about the future. And with Thanos, somehow he was still good, still had clear motivations, was still calm yet ruthless, but he felt a had more bland in this one, but that could be because he had such a dominant amount of screen time in Infinity War. There were certain deaths that happened in this film and Infinity War that had little weight, but only because you assumed the character was going to return, and then when they didn't, you went, oh wow, they're actually dead. People like Nat, people like Gamora, and there's no funerals for Nat, for Gamora, for Vision, for all these fallen people. Another thing which I've seen people point out is, how do the stones work as far as people holding them? From the early films we saw, people can't cope holding the stones or wielding them. They will just die straight away. Whereas in this, people seem to be able to hold them quite easily, and there's little things like Tony seemed to cope a lot more with the power of the gauntlet than even Hulk did. So I'm just curious how all this kind of stuff works. And there are a lot of beats in this movie that felt too similar to Infinity War, and I look and I think we just saw this a year ago. So we're getting more onto stuff I did like. I know it's been very negative, and I said I didn't hate the film. It probably seems it, but I honestly didn't. There were some fantastic parts to this movie. The final battle, this is one of the best moments in cinema for me. It is 11 years worth of build-up, and it's beautiful. It's fantastic. The portal scene where those portals start opening, I bawled my eyes out. It was amazing. The music, everything. There's a visual of Cap on his own against a whole army, and you see the kind of character Captain America is. He's ready to fight this whole army on his own when he knows he won't win, and then everyone starts arriving, and you're just filled with this like hell yeah kind of feeling. It's just on such an epic scale, it's hard to describe. Some of these moments, Cap wielding Mjolnir, and there are some cool theories behind that as well. Some say he could always move it and he just didn't want to upset Thor. Some people say after Civil War, after telling Tony the truth, that made him worthy. Cap using Mjolnir was an amazing thing to see, and how he fought with it. Thor is very brutish and a little clumsy in the way he fights, whereas Cap is a proper trained soldier and he wields hammer and shield so well. This is where for me I was 110% invested in the film, because every moment I was just going, wow, that's amazing, wow, this is cool, proper nerding out. It was so weird as well, because the newer characters like Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, I'm like, I want to see more of them, and then I had to remind myself, like, they dominated Infinity War. This movie is for other people to get a chance. Even people like Captain Marvel I thought we would see more of, but she had just had a solo film. I'm so gutted we didn't see anyone telling Star-Lord off, or that nobody was like, you kind of messed up, you shouldn't have done that. This film for me is very much about Cap and Tony. Their arcs in this film is what made me really enjoy the movie. When I first saw the reunion, Cap and Tony, I was a little bit unsure how I felt, but then it just really sunk in to me how emotional that is. That it's not this big, amazing reunion, that it is just Tony being like, I lost the kid, and hang on a second, this is your fault, Cap, you weren't there. And it just turns to full-on anger and hatred on Tony's part. It was a very interesting way to go. It was the two of them learning to trust each other again, which I really liked. We, of course, with Tony, we had his death, which was so hard-hitting, especially seeing Peter's reaction. You see Peter just completely break down. We see Pepper, who's a lot more calm, telling Tony he can finally rest. It really summed up this as the end game. It's more emotional because Tony finally had a family, he'd finally settled down, he finally had everything he wanted, and he had to give it up. He had to sacrifice himself. It goes back to Cap saying Tony was never the one who's going to lie down on the wire, and he did. And even though I found the delivery of the line a bit odd, the line I am Iron Man as his last line, you can't beat that. And for Cap, he gets that dance with Peggy. We theorised that would be a thing. I'm so happy they did it. Yes, the whole Cap going back in time thing has sprung up a lot of questions. Hopefully they will be answered in future projects. And I love as well that when Cap leaves, Bucky already knows what's going to happen, and it's Sam that is chosen to be the next Captain America. And I can't wait to see that. I can't wait to see him learn to be Captain America. And I think especially in the Falcon Winter Soldier show, go, it will be Falcon slowly transitioning to being the new Cap, and he might even get a new costume. It'll be like a last episode reveal, I think. And Cap has some really cool moments. When we get Cap versus Cap, that fight is great, and I love the elevator scene where you're like, it's the thing from Winter Soldier, he's gonna do it again, and it's a nice twist. This movie overall is a love letter to 11 years worth of movies, to Marvel in general. It is packed full of references and dialogue that call back to all the films. And every time it happens, you don't think, oh, that's cheesy. You're so happy. You're like, this is brilliant. They're wrapping everything up. And the line that really got me, and I think it got everyone, is when Happy asks Tony's daughter, are you hungry? She says, yeah. He says, what do you want? And she says, cheeseburger. And Happy just smiles and he says, your dad liked cheeseburgers too. And it's that callback to Iron Man 1. When Tony got back, he wanted an American cheeseburger. Another line that really got me is when you first hear Sam say, on your left. I didn't register straight away that it's Sam coming back. So that was just an awesome moment for me. And of course, finally, after waiting so long, got Cap, and I'm glad it was Cap, saying Avengers Assemble. And we got another mention of Budapest. I really hope that happens in the Black Widow movie. There was no credit scenes, there was just the sound of Iron Man forging his first suit in Iron Man 1. And Stanley's cameo was him driving past the army base saying, you know, make love, not war, man. And on the bumper sticker, he had "Nuff said." And I kind of really liked that. But those were my immediate thoughts coming out of Endgame. It's like I said, yes, I've got a lot of nitpicky stuff to say about it, but so much of it I did love and just really got me. Moving on again now with some more bits and pieces, I actually want to talk about the Sonic trailer very quickly. For what it's based on, I think it actually looks okay. There's some really nice references to the game, such as certain sound effects. Even the humour in the film, I don't mind. It looks like it might be okay. And even though the Sonic design is very odd, I think it may grow on people the more they see it. And Jim Carrey as Dr. Eggman is just genius. It just works. We've got some Far From Home stuff. We got a new trailer, which now that Endgame's done and out, we finally get to see what this movie's about. It looks like it's going to be about Peter maybe stepping into the Iron Man role. I like the relationship he has with the police, that it's nice and jokey, and he looks far more polished just as Spider-Man. I'm glad that Happy Hogan has what looks to be a much bigger role, and I like that they're exploring Peter and MJ as a couple, and she knows that he's Spider-Man. The biggest thing from this trailer is the fact that Nick Fury is actually working with Mysterio, and the reveal is that Mysterio is from another Earth, that the snap tore a hole in reality, and that we have the multiverse. So the question is Mysterio gonna be a good guy because he's from a different Earth? Or will he still be the villain? I think he will still be the villain. I always geek out for little references. So when Nick Fury's like, bitch please, you've been to space, and Peter's just naming off any other hero that could step in instead of him. We see as well, Spider-Man's using some new tech. We see him wearing Tony's glasses, and I'm wondering if he'll have a new AI, if it might even be Tony himself. And the release date is July 2nd, which I believe is actually sooner than they originally said. We also got some clips released. So the first one is Peter meeting Mysterio, and Mysterio says he is from Earth 833, which is where Spider UK is from, and he confirms that this universe is the 616 universe. And I like that we just get to see Peter be a bit nerdy and show off his intelligence, and Maria Hill's reaction is priceless. And the second clip, we see Hydro Man attacking, and Peter tries to get involved and kind of fails a little bit, and then Mysterio comes in to save Peter. And there's rumours floating about potentially Norman Osborn being in the film, maybe setting up some Dark Avengers stuff. Some news now revolved around casting. It looks like there's the potential for Zac Efron to be Adam Warlock, which I kind of wouldn't mind in a way, and for Robert Pattinson to be Batman. I think he'd be a good Bruce Wayne, but maybe not a great Batman. And Nicholas Hoult was another name that came up for the Batman role. Before we get on to some comic books, I just wanted to say the more I'm seeing of Ultimate Alliance 3, the more excited I'm getting. This game is looking awesome. So to close out, we're going to look at some comic books. First up, we've got Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover. This is the third one they're doing of these. So it's got a gorgeous cover. This is a variant cover, and you see Batman in the original Ninja Turtles style. And it's just got gorgeous art throughout, to be honest. It's superb, it's gritty. I love how the characters look like they do all exist in the same universe. They suit well. So there's just an example of more characters together. And I really like the character designs overall. And the gist of the story is it's Batman and the Turtles versus the Smile Clan. And the twist is essentially that it looks like Krang has somehow merged the two universes. And I assume that based on the fact that characters are like a mix of characters. And then Batman's got vague memories of how things should be. And then we actually get a retro-looking turtle turn up. So that's what I mean by a retro turtle. I really liked the first two stories they did, crossovers they did, but the writing in this was a little bit hit and miss for me. The script is by James Tynion IV. And the art is by Freddie E. Williams II with Kevin Eastman. And then in the back of the book, we had a little preview as well of Snyder and Capullo's Batman Last Night on Earth, which I'm extremely excited for. But overall, the book was interesting. I enjoyed it. Next up is a book I was actually sent for free with some comic books I purchased online. And it's the Year of the Villain book that DC brought out. It's split into 3 chapters. The writers are Snyder, Bendis, and James Tynion IV. The art is by Jim Chun, Alex Maleev, and Francis Manapul. The art for me is just solid throughout. It's 3 very unique styles, but they all work very well together to tell a flowing story. So like I said, you can tell the slight differences. The gist of the story is it's Lex bringing all the villains together to finally win. We also get to see Leviathan, who's going to be a big player in the future, and it turns out that Luthor is actually linked to a bigger villain who was trapped in the Source Wall called Perpetua, and it's just going to be a huge war between all the Justice League, all the Legion of Doom, and we get a new Lex Luthor. I found with the first 2 stories, the writing was very mysterious, it was interesting, it was fun, but the third story, again, it was a little bit off for me. We have a list of the books that are going to be involved in this event, and it seems like it's the kind of event where rather than having a series, it's just going to pop up in all the books you're reading, and they've kind of said you don't have to read all of it. It's just know that in whatever series you're enjoying, this event will affect it. It's an interesting idea, maybe with the intention of getting people to buy and try out more books, which is fair enough because they're not saying it's compulsory to read everything. Next up, we've got some free comic book day stuff. So we've got free comic book day Spider-Man. The first story, the art is incredibly gritty with a very dark tone, as you can see. And I actually really liked it. So it's absolute carnage. It's leading up to that big event. And it sees Eddie Brock, who is now Carnage. And he is collecting symbiotes from everyone that has ever had one. Because if a symbiote's ever been on you, there's a part that still stays there. And once he's collected all those pieces, he can release the symbiote god. The writing's incredibly tense, and each scene is just gripping, and it's badass. The second story is just a little backup story with Peter and Miles. And they're just swinging around and they're arguing about where does the best pizza in New York, and it's just this fun little story with some slightly cheesy writing. The art in it, I would say it's just very crisp and very solid. The first story was written by Donny Cates with Ryan Stegman on pencils. And the second story was written by Saladin Ahmed and Tom Taylor. And then we had Corey Smith on pencils for that one. So the second one I picked up was the Spawn issue 1 reprint, because why not? I have never read Spawn and was really interested in picking this up. So of course Spawn is by Todd McFarlane. As I said, this is a reprint of issue 1, and to me it's got real Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns vibes to it with the page layout and the art. And I'm actually a huge fan of the gritty artwork. So with this, with the news stories and everything else, it just reminded me of Dark Knight Returns. We get to meet Al Simmons, find out a bit about his background, see that he's haunted by a past he's struggling to remember, and we get to see bits and pieces of what Spawn can do. It's a mystery throughout the writing, and that's a very good hook to have. And the story's just as gritty as the art. It has some real horror elements in it. And lastly, for Free Comic Book Day, The Avengers. This is 2 two stories. The first story is about the regular Avengers team, and it seems to be Marvel poking fun at DC. So the Squadron Supreme is Marvel's Justice League in a sense. But in the story, they go, no, those are Washington's superheroes. People don't want them. No, we want the Avengers. And the Avengers don't always know what they're doing, but they're always trying their best. It's interesting as well because this clearly takes place after War of the Realms, and we get to see some different Avengers teams, including the Avengers from the far, far past, which I think were featured in like Marvel Legacy, so it's been building for a while. The art's really nicely detailed, however, it was the writing for me in this. It just really didn't draw me in. The second story in that book is the Savage Avengers being focused on. The art's really gritty, it's very violent, there's lots of red and grey being used as well throughout. So we've got Wolverine, he's investigating a kidnapping involving the Hand, and we just have this great moment of Elektra in disguise. She brings Stick, who is playing dead, to a Hand associate, and they're able to spring their trap on him and get information. The writing's really great, it's fun, and the characters are all very edgy, but not in a cheesy way. So the first story is written by Jason Aaron, with Stefano Caselli on art, and the second story is Jerry Duggan writing it, and Mike Diodato Jr. on art. And the very last thing I will be talking about for these comic books, and for the video itself, is this very special reprinting of Marvel Feature Issue 1, and it's the Origin of the Defenders. These reprints are awesome, they're facsimiles, and they reprint the book with all the ads and stuff as well. So this is Roy Thomas writing it, and Ross Andrew on art, and Stan Lee as the editor. I always really enjoy looking at classic art, and where the story and the writing is concerned, yes, reading it now it is cheesy, but you have that soft spot for it. So yeah, you can see some of that old school art by there. Yandroth wants to destroy the world. Strange needs to stop him, so he must gather together some heroes to help him. And it's just a simple, fun story of them using their skills together, combining their efforts, and saving the day. The book also features an old Namor tale from the 50s, and it's actually a pretty great story. It's Namor thinking that the surface is attacking, and so they start moving icebergs around to trap these surface ships. When they investigate, they find out they're not battleships, they're just on a scientific expedition. So Namor ends up helping them, and in return they warn him there's going to be an underwater avalanche that is going to wipe out the city below, so Namor is able to get everybody to safety. And finally we have a story which is the return of Doctor Strange, which takes place before that Defenders story. And it's the same team, but this time it's Don Heck on the art. So Doctor Strange, he returns to the Sanctum to find there's an imposter there. They end up battling. Doctor Strange gets his powers back from the Ancient One. Strange is able to overcome the imposter and finds out that it is Mordo. Strange turns his back for a second. Mordo escapes, but it reinstates Doctor Strange as the master of the mystic arts. And it was really nice reading this book, seeing a few old stories, and especially seeing the old ads, the old bulletins, everything. It's just a really nice experience to get to experience for me for the first time, this book. Anyway guys, I have covered a lot in this video, but that's everything for now. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out. Check out the links in the description down below. Check out the whole channel, especially the playlists, and I'll see all of you in the next one.